Hi y'all, thanks so much for stopping back by. If this is your first time here, then welcome. I appreciate your time. Thanks so much for stopping by. My name is Lori Livers. I know, it looks like livers, but it sounds like livers, so welcome. My name is Lori Livers. Today's video is 5 tips for being a great landlord that I don't think you've probably heard anyplace else. Now I realize there's a lot of great tips out there, and all of them are probably really good, but I have 5 that I want to share with you today that I don't think you've probably heard anyplace else. So let's just get right into it with tip number 1. And tip number 1 is really, really important. Tip number 1 is to set the method of communication right up front. Do you want to be called on the phone? Do you want to be texted, or do you want to be emailed? For me, text is best. I don't like answering the phone. I don't know why. I am just not somebody who talks on the phone. I wish I was that person, but I'm not, and I understand this about myself, so I'm not going to try to force myself to talk on the phone. It'll be uncomfortable for me, and if I'm uncomfortable, I will absolutely make it uncomfortable for my tenants inadvertently, and I don't want to do that. I don't want them to email me if there's a problem, because I know I might check my email maybe once, maybe twice a day. And so if there's an issue with the house, I definitely want to know about it sooner than later. And so I always tell my tenants right up front, text is best. In the case of an emergency, if the house is on fire, call 911 and then text me. I'll call you right back. So don't be afraid to set that communication method right up front. It's better for everybody in the end. So before I get started with tip number 2, I just want to say right up front, sorry about the lighting situation. It's a partly sunny day today, and that means it's partly cloudy sometimes too. So the light gets bright, the light gets dim, whatever. You know what partly sunny, partly cloudy means. But anyway, so that's what's going on with the lighting situation today. Now that we're past the lighting, let's get on to tip number 2. So tip number 2 is to really clearly communicate with your tenants on what things they're responsible for in the home and what things you'll take responsibility for in the home. Obviously, anything's broken, not stops functioning, structural related, that's on the landlord. That's, just part of the deal. We're maintaining the house and they're buying us a house, so that's how that works out. But these simple maintenance issues, things like light bulbs and smoke detector batteries and lawn maintenance, in my leases, those are the responsibility of my tenants. So when I'm doing that walkthrough with my tenants on the day that they receive the keys to the property, I go over all of those things. I tell them, I've put new light bulbs in all the light fixtures, so they should be good to go. But when a light bulb burns out, that's their responsibility to replace it. I also tell them I've put fresh batteries in all the smoke detectors in the house. But if a smoke detector starts chirping, that's their responsibility to replace that battery as well. Lawn maintenance is really important for my properties, because I have some properties that are in some really big lots. I do offer lawn maintenance as an option for my tenants to include in their lease, but if they choose not to, I just walk the property with them and explain to them that I have the yard maintained. I will have the yard done either the day before they move in or sometimes early on the day that they are planning to move in, so that it's freshly manicured, and explain to them that this is the way it needs to be maintained. But having had those conversations up front gives them the opportunity to ask any questions on what you expect as far as maintenance is concerned, and it gives you the opportunity to really set that standard, so they're not calling you because the light bulb burned out in the kitchen. They know right up front that it's their responsibility to replace that light bulb, and that's something I really appreciate. Tip number 3 for having a successful landlord-tenant relationship is to immediately take action on any valid complaint, concern, issue that your tenant might have. And this is really important for a couple of reasons. One of those reasons is that you need to protect your investment. You need to protect that house. And if you deal with whatever an issue might be when it's small, then you don't have the expense of dealing with issues when they get big. So it makes more sense for you as an investor to deal with an issue when it's small. Another critically important reason why you want to take action on any type of valid complaint immediately is that so you protect your relationship with your tenant. You don't want your tenants moving in and out every year. You do not want to start over with a new tenant every year. It's not in anybody's best interest. People don't like to move. It's a pain in the butt to move. So if that tenant knows that you immediately take action with any valid concern or issue they have, then they start to trust in that relationship. And the trust in that relationship makes it much easier for you to deny the tenant in the event that they have a complaint or issue that is not valid. So if you deal with every concern they have that is valid right up front immediately, then it's very easy to have the conversation, explain to them that you're not going to come change the light bulb in the kitchen, that that's their responsibility. And they're not going to be offended by that. They're going to recall that you had that conversation with them when they first moved in. And because they know you're a great landlord that's going to take care of everything you're supposed to take care of and take care of them and take care of the house, it's going to make that situation where you do have to say that's something I'm not going to take responsibility for much easier. It's going to make that entire interaction much easier for both you and your tenant. So tip number 3, when they have a valid complaint, concern, issue, take care of it right away. So here we are already at tip number 4. And tip number 4 is to not try to deal with an issue for your tenant that is not yours to deal with. And these can be kind of sticky situations sometimes. For instance, if the tenant's neighbor, if the person that lives next door to your property has loud parties that goes on till 3 a.m. and your tenant can't sleep and their dog is barking and they call you, there is nothing you can do about that. And it's important that you don't try to reach out to the neighbor and you don't try to deal with these types of situations with your tenant. Your tenant has a legal contract, a lease with you, but your neighbors, the tenant's neighbors, don't have a legal contract lease with you. So in those types of situations, I always advise my tenants to call the police if it's some type of issue that feels like you need immediate resolution to. Call the police, make a complaint about the noise ordinance or whatever it is, or call the city if your neighbor hasn't brought their trash can in 10 days or whatever it might be. Don't put yourself in a situation where you're trying to deal with issues for your tenant that are not yours to deal with. Remember, your tenant can move, but your neighbors may be your neighbors forever. So protect those relationships as well, just like you would any other. So the next tip is one that was given to me, and I can't remember who shared this information with me. But if I think about it, I will list it in the description down below. And I'm going to tell you right up front, I don't do this. I don't do this next tip. But the next tip is that if you are uncomfortable representing yourself as the owner of the property, the owner, landlord of the property, then represent yourself as the property manager and not the owner. By doing this, you create a little bit of space for yourself if you're uncomfortable having some of those more difficult conversations. You can always tell the tenant, I'm so sorry, I can't come change that light bulb in your kitchen for you, because that's something the owner of this property doesn't take responsibility for. It gives you that little bit of a buffer zone between you and the tenant if that's something you need. I don't do this because I've made sure I rehab my properties to a great condition, so I never have to apologize for the condition of a property before a tenant or after a tenant moves in. I also make sure I screen my tenants really, really well so that I know by the time I've chosen somebody to live in one of my properties that they're a good match for that property. Also, I've walked that property and explained to them what the owner, myself, takes responsibility for and what I don't take responsibility for. And I find having this simple conversation on the day that you hand over the keys alleviates a lot of these future conversations from ever even happening. And I don't want to assume that my tenant can't go on Google and find out who actually owns this property. If they want to look for a few minutes on the internet, they can find out who owns a property. And I don't want to find myself in a situation where I'm explaining to a tenant why I represented myself as a property manager when really I am the owner that I was talking about. So that's why I don't follow this tip. However, I still think it's a great tip. Not everybody is at a point where they're comfortable taking on these kinds of interactions in these kinds of situations, and that's okay. There's room in the world for all of us, and there's room for us all to be different. So I think that's a great tip if you're not ready to represent yourself as the owner of a property. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. It doesn't work for me, but just because it doesn't work for me doesn't mean it can't work for you. And whatever works for you and gets you to the life that you want to live and not the life you thought you had to live works for everybody. So those are some tips to help you be a great landlord so that you can live that life that you want to live and not the life you thought you had to live. I know I say that over and over and over again, but I do it on purpose because it is such an important thing for me, and I hope it is for you too. I want everybody to live the life they choose, not the life that they might feel was chosen for them. So, yeah. Y'all, it is getting hot in here, so I'm gonna have to wrap it up. So there you have it. Those are the few tips I have to offer you today to help you be a more successful landlord. I hope you picked up something today that you can use, and I hope you've heard something today that you haven't heard anyplace else before. If you have any other tips you'd love to share, I'd love to hear about that down in the comments. Please drop down into the comments. Tell me, what do you think makes for a successful landlord? I'm always interested in learning more, and I want to get to know y'all, so drop down to the comments, say hi. Hit that subscribe button down below and ring the bell so you can be notified of all the new videos coming your way, and we'll hang out again soon. But until then, bye y'all. Y'all. It is getting so hot in here. Every time that sun starts beating through these windows, I'm like, having a heat stroke over here. So maybe I'm gonna have to switch to iced coffee. I don't know. What do you think?